Folks, welcome to the third episode of the series, Magnus' Rise to the Top. We are following the book, How Magnus Carlsen Became the Youngest Grandmaster in the World, to catch you guys up. Anyway, this game takes place in 2002. Magnus plays a 1600. We rarely get a chance to see games where Magnus, best player in the world, plays against, mortal players like a 1600. So let's see how Magnus Carlsen handles a 1600. And believe it or not, though, the 1600 even, plays a pretty good game. And spoiler alert, will eventually lose. I don't think that's too much of a spoiler alert. But let's see how the game goes. Magnus playing the Sicilian defense. Looks like he was going to play the Dragon, but he decided not to. He decides to play this conservatively. He probably doesn't know his openings in and out at this point. Probably just has a basic level of understanding of the openings and doesn't know them too sharp, but probably has a very good understanding of tactics and strategy. So basically, he wants to keep the game calm, and he figures he'll outplay his opponent. Similar to his style now, but he just knows the openings very well now, very sharply. He just decides to play like that because he just likes to grind games out. Okay, so you see here, Magnus plays knight e8, a strange-looking move. He's pretty much enticing white to trade the bishops, which he does. But now this pawn is a little weak, so, white has a slight advantage here. It's kind of annoying. The pawn is defended twice, though, so white can't take it, but it is a little bit of a burden. But Magnus manages to unwind and defend the pawn, but has to do a series of unnecessary moves to do it. But again, this is Magnus Carlsen's style, even from a young age. So he has to play bishop c8 just to eventually kind of play d5. I have the coordinates up on the board now. As you can see, that is at the request of one of my subscribers who made a good point that I don't have the coordinates set up and some players can't follow along. So there you go. Anyway, so bishop c8 just puts more defense, more protection onto e6, on d6. Also, at some point, you can play a central break like d5. Okay, so Magnus playing queen c7, just getting his queen to a diagonal that faces the king side, and also, maybe might hit this diagonal at some point if the queen moves away. We might have forks if the knight's not defended or the pawn's not defended. So Magnus just, basically being flexible. Okay, so every time our opponent moves, we want to ask ourselves, what's the reason for it? First of all, are they attacking something? Is there a threat? In this case, there's no threat. Rook d2 does not threaten anything in particular. So then what's the point of the move, okay? And then we have to say, okay, well, the point is he's going to bring his rook to d1. And then we have to say, is it a good idea? And in this case, it's a pretty reasonable idea. It's nothing to be scared of. But again, Magnus has a weak pawn here he would like to get rid of or play d5 at some point, and white's trying to exploit that and take that pawn. Okay, so we have b5. Now, how do I explain b5? Magnus would like to play d5 at some point because this pawn is not protected. d5 would get rid of it. It would take more. Black would have more space. The bishop would come unfree. The rook would be free. So this is a move that's just natural and wants to be played. One of the protectors of d5 is this knight. So maybe Magnus wants to play something like, let's say white plays a random move. Magnus wants to play something like this. And then maybe at some point d5, he has to, after the knight moves, maybe now Magnus plays something like d5 or something. So we'll see. Anyway, so white stops that idea. Notice how, good chess players understand what's going on, right? These guys are both locked into this game. It's probably a very long, slow game, tournament game. So, white's whole plan here is centered around getting this pawn. Magnus wants to, make a break for this pawn, get rid of this pawn somehow without losing material. And every move is set up around that. And white notices that right away and says, nope, not letting you play this. I'll just take it. Okay, so Magnus just develops and brings his bishop to an excellent square. So this is a fianchettoed bishop, for those of you who don't know. But most of you probably know that fianchettoed bishop is the bishop on the biggest diagonal of the board, which is the a8, h1 diagonal or the h8, a1 diagonal. Okay, so rook d1. So Magnus's opponent playing pretty well here, doubles the rooks on a semi-open file and putting more pressure on that d6 pawn. Magnus just develops his knight now, gets his knight off the back rank. He feels like he has adequate defense on the pawn, which he does. And also this defends this square, which is more important now than actually defending the pawn. The reason why that is because the pawn is already defended enough times. And again, Magnus would like to probably play d5. And the more protection he has on this, the more likely he's going to be able to play d5. So the whole game right now is centered around, can black play d5? So just think about that, and we're going to get into some interesting ideas in a few moves. Okay. White plays a great move here. Queen b6, okay, and just putting pressure on a lot of things. Not really threatening to win right away, but putting pressure, in a sense, does. Because if something changes in the position, now white is threatening to win a piece. Let's say Magnus just plays a regular move. e5 is actually the threat here. And after it takes, and we just have, winning a piece right here, and that would be great. Actually, the best move here would just be to throw an in-between move. And after this, now we take back, queen c6, and after knight f4, knight g4, white's definitely better here. Black gets a little bit of compensation. But there's definitely threats in this position because queen is placed in black's territory and is a thorn in black's side right now. Okay, so Magnus protects the bishop and also unleashes, there's also discovery. So wherever the bishop goes, the rook will hit the queen. Now, there's not a good discovery here, you're right, if that's what you're saying, but eventually, let's say the knight comes out, the bishop, so white should probably start thinking about getting his queen out. However, it looks like white can actually just grab a pawn right here, and, I think that's actually what white did here. Okay, so white did actually grab the pawn. So Magnus just gives up the pawn completely here. And now just goes for b4. So b4, hitting the knight. White takes, and Magnus takes back. And now the queen moves. So the queen moves away because good players don't want to be in discovery. Discoveries are very powerful moves. If you left his queen there, you just win free pawns. And now you're hitting the queen. Now white has to come back and defend the bishop. And, black just got a free pawn back. So, anyway, we have queen f2. And now this is a really nice move. This is an excellent move. So knight e5. Knight e5 actually is trapping the rook here. So the rook is now under attack. And if white does something like this, well, Magnus gets the pawn back. So Magnus using tactics to get himself out of a bad position and totally turn the game around. This is why you should always really focus, put a heavy emphasis on your tactics training, and always keep an open mind as you're looking at the chessboard. Never look at a chessboard, analyze one of your games, and think to yourself, there's nothing going on here. I have nothing in this position. There's usually always some type of idea. Even if it's not there right at the moment, you can always manifest it, create it within the next couple of moves. There's always ideas lurking in the chessboard because chess is infinite and there's so many moves, combinations of moves, and ideas that you can deploy in a chess game. Okay, so that's actually what happened. e5, Magnus gets the pawn back, queen g3 attacking the knight. Magnus trades the bishops, and now here, what would you guys play? Because this is important. Because some of you would play probably g5. And g5 looks okay. However, there's a problem. And it's not necessarily with weakening your king. Because your king's actually pretty okay here. You're actually anchoring your knight to a nice square. It looks good. It's the fact that the queen now is kind of stuck. And rook d7 kind of changes things. And now your queen is stuck on e8. Only square your queen can go to. And white's going to have, after knight c5, a really good game here. So, what do? There's a couple of different moves here. Actually, Magnus did not play the best move here. Just simply going back to g6 or queen a7 check is a good move. But Magnus actually played queen g5. Queen G5, however, is definitely a legit move, and it's far superior than playing G5. It's protecting the knight. The queen is still a versatile piece here, and he's putting pressure on the king side. The best move for white here is knight C5, which is played, and now Magnus plays F5. So let's go back one move. Why didn't white play knight C5? So white played knight C5. Again, good players, and this player is a good player. 1600, it's not the highest rating in the world, but this person's very good. So knight C5 is tricky. Now he wants to protect the pawn, but if we protect it in a straightforward way like this, that gives up. We're just going to take this pawn, hit the rook. Now the rook can't come here because of the knight. Can't come here because of the knight. Has to come here, but I mean, then we just have now, mind you, this knight is hanging. We just can go, first of all, we can just take if we wanted to right here, and white can take, and this is pretty good for us. I mean, but there's so many combinations here. It's not a really good position for white. So he plays knight c5 to indirectly defend the pawn. What do I mean by that? Well, now if you take, we have this fork. So Magnus says, okay, that's a good move. That's great, but I don't care about the pawn. I care about the king. That's why my queen's here. Not to hit the pawn. It's there for you to think I'm going for the pawn. Well, I'm actually going for the king. So he's putting pressure on g4. And now white has a final move to keep himself in the game here. Try to pause your videos and find it. The move here is h4. Now, h4 only works because white's taking advantage of Magnus's queen and the relationship to the knight. What do I mean by that? Well, the knight is only protected by the queen. So it's a deflection tactic. So if the queen cannot just take this pawn, because then the knight drops. So this is forcing black. Again, Magnus can't come here because then we have this. And after something like this, yeah, it's okay, I guess. But it's really forcing Magnus to take on g4. And then after this trade, it slows down, absolutely kills black's attack. And white is left with double rooks on the d file. It's about an even game. Who's going to win this? Magnus. Not because of the position, though, just because he's Magnus. But this would be a very reasonable way to play it. However, his opponent missed that and just went for the forks. Now, this is very common among lower-rated players that have skill in tactics and some positional understanding, but they're not getting the full view of the chessboard. What do I mean by that? They're not seeing what's most important. So Magnus saw that his rooks were going to get forked, but he's not defending it for a reason. So you have to ask yourself, why is he not defending it? Because it's just not important. It's not important because the king is the object of the game. That's what we want to go for. And the king is about to be exploited. So Magnus takes first, hits the queen. Again, you can't take the rooks because the queen's attacked. And after this, we throw in a check. You can't take the rooks because you're in check. And now after this move, now notice if white went into the corner, we have rook f3 hitting the queen. And let's say the queen just moves here, knight f2. You can win the rook whenever you want, but better is just this, setting up this discovery. This game is absolutely over. But the game's over anyway. White comes to g2 instead of the corner. We have rook f2 and then rook f3. Again, now white can't take the rook here because you're taking the queen. And also, there's no more fork because the rook's gone from that square and attacking the queen. So white comes up with a clever defense, it looks like. White plays knight e4. Now, knight e4 looks good because, well, not only are you still hitting the rook, which is always good, but it looks like a active way of defending. Black's attacking the queen, so white's going to attack Magnus's queen. There's one problem with that. White's not really attacking his queen because Magnus can just take the queen, and you can't take the queen back. Why is that? If you take, checkmate on the spot. King cannot come out. For that reason, Magnus just took the queen. His opponent realized at this time probably, oh, wait, I can't take the queen. So instead, he just took the rook. But then after queen e3 and taking the rook, Magnus threw in a check, knight f2, and his opponent resigned. This is a lost game. Well, there you have it. This is Magnus Carlsen and how he deals with, well, at least as a kid, how he dealt with a 1600 rated player. Pretty cool to see. And you have to give credit to the 1600 player. He hung in there, played a decent game. Anyway, if you like that video, check out this one and get out of here. Go play some chess.